Hi, welcome to my talk. So this afternoon we're going to be talking about Django and HTMX. So before we get started, how many people have heard of HTMX? HTMX. You have heard of HTMX? Who has tried it? Like you've used it in development? One? Wow. So just about 3 or 4 of us have heard of HTMX. That was interesting. So anyway, today you are going to be learning more about HTMX and you're going to see how you can use it in your Django applications. How many Django developers do we have here? You do Django. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Do you do your front end in Django? Everything, the whole stack in Django. What do you use for front end? Web and JavaScript for your front end. Okay, cool. So for someone that is doing their front end in Django or who is planning to do their front end in Django, you really, really fall in love with HTMX. Okay? So what is okay? What is HTMX? HTMX is, how do I put it? Are we familiar with Bootstrap? Bootstrap, you know Bootstrap. Everybody knows Bootstrap, right? Tailwind. Yeah, good. So what Bootstrap is to CSS is what HTMX is to JavaScript. So what does Bootstrap do for you? Bootstrap allows you to style your web page, right? Without writing any CSS. What you do is you add classes. For buttons, you put class BTN. For large buttons, you do BTN -LG large, and then you have a large button, right? That is the same concept behind the development of HTMX. HTMX allows you to do stuff that you usually need to write a lot of JavaScript code to do. But now in this case, you just add tags, some attributes, you add it to your normal HTML, and then it starts behaving like JavaScript. You don't even have to know JavaScript to use HTMX. And that is the kind of power that HTMX is going to give to you. So as we proceed in this talk, we are going to see some examples of where you can actually use HTMX in Django, and then you can have all these dynamic interactions without even writing a single line of JavaScript. So what is the current state of Django frontend? If you've been building with Django, you know that right now one of the most annoying things with Django is that it reloads all the time, right? If you want to do a simple form search, maybe you have an app and then you want to search for a user. Once you enter the name of that user and then you click on that search button, what does it do? It reloads the entire page. That is one of the limitations of Django frontend. And it's like that by design because it was built just to render HTML. It was not built to do anything fancy. The concept of the Django frontend is to just make a request to the backend, bring the HTML, and then present it to you. Okay? So, but then as software development has been progressing, we have seen the development of front-end frameworks like React, Vue that everybody's using now, and they don't perform all of these reloads all the time. Okay? So with HTMX, you're able to do stuff like that, whereby your web page does not reload all the time, and then the content of the page is changing dynamically with HTMX and JavaScript working behind. And another limitation of Django frontend is the fact that if you really want to build something very, very interactive, you need to learn JavaScript. How many people here don't like JavaScript? You don't like JavaScript? We are plenty. Yeah, I've learned JavaScript before, but then I'm not a big fan. I don't know. I think the problem comes from when you started learning programming with Python, and then you decide to learn JavaScript. You'll be like, why is this thing just like this? Why can't you guys just borrow some things from Python and just make it straightforward? So to me, there's no big deal, but then they make it so complicated, and that is the problem. If you really want to do fancy stuffs with front end, you have to go and learn React, which means you have to learn JavaScript. And they're not even telling us that you don't have to learn JavaScript again. You have to learn TypeScript. Yeah, that's where they're going now. So it's no more JavaScript. You will eventually find yourself doing TypeScript. That's a lot of learning to do. Okay? But with a library like HTMX, you don't have to do all of these anymore. So what can HTMX do for you? HTMX gives your HTML, your regular HTML tags, JavaScript capabilities. It allows you to make Ajax calls, requests. You can do CSS transitions. You can have WebSockets, and you can even have server-sent events. So you can make your front end adjust or react to events that are coming from the backend without reloading the page. So it behaves just like when you are using a front-end framework like React. And I've seen people use HTMX to build apps, and you won't even know the difference. You think maybe they use a front-end framework, but then everything is inside Django, and it's just manipulating the DOM. Okay, and HTMX gives you a minimalistic approach in the sense that you are not installing anything. In fact, you can use HTMX and everything it offers you without installing anything. It does not build, it does not do any of those things. And then there's progressive enhancement in the sense that it does not replace what you have right now. So if you have an old app that you've built with Django, you can actually integrate HTMX into it gradually. You can pick, say, the home page. You say today, home page, I'm going to optimize it with HTMX. So let's say you have a search form on your home page that reloads all the time. You can pick that search form alone, and then you optimize it such that it does not reload anymore. HTMX does the job for you, and then it starts working and giving you a better user experience. And then gradually you can start changing different aspects of your application to make them better with HTMX. So some of the features of HTMX, we have the Ajax request. You can make get, post, delete, and put request inside HTML tags without your web page reloading. So all these are the common things that you actually do: post request, get request, DOM manipulation, and a lot of other stuff that are available in HTMX. So how do you get started with HTMX? Very simple. 2 ways. First one, you download the HTMX library itself. It's just one JavaScript file. Same way you have the Bootstrap file. So you can download HTMX and then you link to it from your HTML in the head. You just link to it. Or better still, the one I love, use the CDN link. You don't need to download anything. You just have to add the CDN link in the head section of your HTML page like this, and you already have HTMX installed. You don't have to do Vite, do Node, all those kind of things. HTMX is pretty easy to use. Just put it in your HTML template, and then you get all the power of JavaScript. So with HTMX, you can do HXGet, which allows you to make a GET request to fetch a resource or a file data from the backend. You can do post with HXPost that sends data to the backend without any reload. You can do HXPut and you can do HXTarget. HXTarget is very, very powerful. It allows you to target different sections of your website, and then you can perform DOM manipulations. You can replace data, you can adjust stuff using the HXTarget attribute. So this is an example. This is a form, a typical form in a Django template. So what we are doing here is we have the HXPost, which makes a post request to the submit URL. You can see it right here. There's a target called result with the ID result. So what we are doing is, if you look at this point, there's a div there with the ID result. So when you submit this form, whatever response you get from the backend will be displayed inside this div without reloading the page. So it will behave as if you didn't do anything. But in the background, HTMX will send the requests to that URL, get a response, and then display it down there. So usually you have something like your form is submitted successfully, right? And so it's just going to put it inside that div, and then it's going to show it to the user without performing any page reload. This is another example. HXGet. In this example, you are making a GET request to the backend, and then you are getting a content from the backend, and then you are displaying it in a div. So HTMX with Django, like I said earlier, just put the CDN link and you're able to do stuff like this. So this is a practical example. I actually did this in one of my app. I used to have one app where users actually need to sign up to use it. So the usual process when you want to do sign up in Django, I believe when you want to sign up, you are presented with a form, username, password, blah, blah, blah. Now, here is a little problem. If, for example, my name is Joseph, I already signed up on the website with the username of Joseph. If you come to that same app and you want to sign up, and then your name is Joseph, you put Joseph, you put your password, you put your email, and then you submit. It is at the point of submission that is when you will know that that username is taken, right? That is the way Django behaves. Until you submit the form, you will not know that I've taken that username. But with HTMX, you can perform a background request to the backend to check if that username exists or not, such that as a user is typing, you can send a response from the backend to let the user know that, oh, the username Joseph is already taken. Please choose another one. So that the user doesn't have to keep submitting that form all the time and then reloading and reloading and reloading just because they want to sign up. So with few attributes here, HX post, you make a post request to the check username endpoint. So here, this is making a request to this URL, and then the trigger is key up, delay 2 seconds. So what it's saying is that after 2 seconds of a user, when the user stops typing, send a request to this URL to check if the username is already taken, and then display the result. This is the target. Display the result inside user error div. So this is how it's just going to work. This is a div here called user error. So if the username is taken, underneath the form, it's just going to show something like this username is taken. Choose another one. I'm going to show you the view that handles this. So this is a view in the backend, the Django view that handles this. Very simple and straightforward. A request comes in, it gets the username from that post request, and then it checks if that username exists. If it exists, it sends a response that this username already exists. If not, it sends a response that the username is available, and then the user can proceed. By doing this, you have saved the user a lot of time, and you have also made the user experience better for the user. So no more form reloads with just HTML attributes. As you can see, I didn't write a single line of JavaScript. Not a single line of JavaScript. What I did was just add some attributes, 3 guys like this, to the form, and then everything is sorted. It behaves as if I'm using a front-end framework. So let's look at another example. How many people here are familiar with the Django message framework? The message framework. So the Django message framework does stuff like this. I believe you might have seen this if you do Django, where it allows you to send messages to the front end and then it displays on the website. Usually, this message is always stuck on the page until you perform the next reload. That's the default behavior. I don't know why. So when, say, for example, somebody updated their profile in your app and then you send them a message like this, profile details updated, the message is going to show at the top of the page. Usually that's where we put it. That's the norm as a Django developer. And then it stays there until the person reloads the page or move to another page, and then it disappears. But with HTMX, you can actually make this guy disappear dynamically, such that maybe after 5 seconds, the message will just slide and then fade away, which is cool. That's what happens in most notification systems in app. To do this right now without HTMX, you have to write some JavaScript that checks if this exists, and then you set a timer, and then it takes it out after that timer. But with HTMX, let's see what we can do. So with HTMX, what do? We add these attributes that sends a GET request to this URL called clear. I'm going to show you the view that handles this. So when this calls clear, it triggers after 3 seconds, and then it clears the message on the web page. So after 3 seconds, any message that has been sent automatically will disappear. from the front end of the Django app. So this is the view that handles it. Can you see? Just one line. So what does it do? Accept the request. When the request comes, return HTTP response empty. Nothing is inside. So it returns an empty response. So what HTMX does is it replaces that message with an empty response. And that is why the message will disappear. Just a simple one line is all you need to clear that message. And that is what HTMX can do for you. So HTMX has a lot of tags. In fact, there's a particular tag called HX Boost. HX Boost is very, very, very versatile. It allows you to move from one page to the next page without any reload. For example, you're on the home page, you want to go to the About page. Usually in front-end frameworks, when you click on About, you just discover that it switches to the next page, right? Based on the way they work. Now, in Django templates, you can actually do that with HX Boost. HX Boost does that. What it does is, in the background, it loads each pages. It has loaded them. It's just waiting for you to click. The moment you click, it switches to that page without a single reload. And then it behaves like a regular React or Vue application. So these are some of the beautiful use cases of HTMX. So that was it, guys. I hope some of you are going to try out HTMX and you'll be able to build some cool front end using HTMX. So any questions before we go? Questions? Questions on HTMX?
Great talk, by the way. So I've got like 3 questions. The first is HTMX is actually JavaScript library, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you are still writing Java, as in you're still using a JavaScript library. So the first question is, would you say it's only, as in it's a library that's helpful for specific kind of web applications, or is it as ubiquitous as maybe any other JavaScript framework? And the second one is, again, if you inspect the dev tools when you wrapping HTMX DOM nodes around your application, you notice a lot of endpoints, as in chatter. If you look at the dev tools, the network tab, you see a lot of calls. So observing that, and that's not something you easily observe when you use other JavaScript frameworks. So from a backend standpoint, isn't that a problem? As in, because you're always making multiple API calls. Because under the old HTMX is basically fetching partials from the backend and is inserting inside the DOM node. So isn't the multiple chatter a problem? Depending on the backend, as in, couldn't that result in a DDoS, denial of service? Again, depending on the number of users that might be using the application, wouldn't that be an issue in that case?
Okay, so for the first question, HTMX can actually be used for any kind of application. But usually, no, HTMX is not for mobile, it's for web. So it's more or less a replacement for frameworks like React, Vue, Servlet, and all those kind of stuff. So usually, the idea behind HTMX is that you don't have to use a complicated tool to build simple regular websites. The truth of the matter is, except you are building something like maybe Facebook or Google Calendar, you really don't need all of the tools and all of these huge features that you have in React and some other frameworks. A lot of times, what we are building is just, they're not so complicated. They are not graphic intensive. They are not, that kind of app. So with HTMX, you can easily do all those things without the overhead cost of having a separate code base just because of the front end.
Yeah, but based off what you just said now, it means it's not useful for all kinds of web application because, like you said, if you are building something like Facebook, Google Calendar, is not necessarily useful.
Sure. Good. Yes, you can use it, but then the thing is this: the issue with that kind of apps is state management. That's one of the advantage of spas. Why people actually just do them is because of state management. But if your app is not reliant much on the front end state management and stuff like that, you really don't need it. With HTMX, you are good to go. Basically, HTML, if you are doing front end with API calls all the time, you really don't need all of these front end frameworks. But if you are doing a lot of state management, you are doing drag and drop. Yeah, when you get to drag and drop features and all those kind of a little bit complicated stuff, then you might want to look at front end framework. Now, for the request, when you're inspecting the app, is HTMX is not making API calls per se because you are not doing API calls. You are just making requests to the backend, just like a normal HTML would do. The only difference is that it's not reloading the page. It gives you interactivity such that everything can be done in the background while you are doing other things. But right now in the regular Django, when you are doing one thing, the page is loading. You can't do anything else. You have to wait until that page is loaded and then you have to click another button. But with HTMX, you can have one button submitting a form. You can have another button making a request to fetch an image. Then you can have another, I don't know, another request in the background, maybe fetching some other stuff. And then these three things can be happening at the same time and the page is not reloading. So that's one of the advantage of HTMX.
Any more questions?
Any more questions?
That was a long drilling session. So, 1, 2, 3, right? We have about 7 minutes more, so let's just be fast
Yeah,
with
we
our
still
questions
have,
and answers.
we still have 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, sir, for your. This is really impactful. Is there a special installation process or is there a package I need to install before I can start using HTML? And also, I can easily inspect the web page and get the endpoint and run a brute force attack on the endpoint. Now, it's easily for me to hack because I can easily run and I can inspect your what's it called the web page, or I can just add view source and show me the source code. And in the source code, obviously there will be endpoints, and I can run a brute force attack. Is there any is there a way this thing is being secured, or is it a good idea for me to like build a software?
Okay, first one for the installation, like I said, installation is straightforward. You can use a CDN link. So HTMX, if you go to htmx.org, there's a link that you have to copy and then you put it in the head section of your app. In fact, any HTML file, if you do index.html and then you put that link inside the head of that file, you can start using HTMX and it will work. Pretty straightforward. For the security part, the truth of the matter is, except we are deceiving ourselves, there is no app or framework that you cannot inspect. Be it React, be it Vue, be it anything. If the person that has your time, forget. There's nothing you are doing that they can't figure it out. Even mobile apps. Do you know that you can debundle mobile apps, APKs, that you split everything down and then you see all the files inside, you see all the endpoints. You understand? It's a matter of just having the time to do what they need to do. So, security-wise, if you follow the standard security architectures and designs, you should be fine. I mentioned some of them yesterday. Data validation, access control. So if an attacker is trying to access an endpoint or a URL where they don't have access to it, no matter what you do, they'll be getting a 403 error. Or better still, they get 401, depending on whatever you have put in place. So no matter what you are using, there's nothing, there's nothing secret out there anymore, except if they don't have your own time. So the only prayer that everybody prays that when you build an app, pray that the people that will hack you, pray that they don't have your time. So that when they try small, they get tired and then they move forward. But if they have your time, my brother, it's a long thing. Oh. So that's just the way it is. Any other question? Okay. Peter, question. Just behind you.
Okay. For TMX, is there a way to add like variables for like normal JavaScript how it does to add variables to your HTML files? And is it possible to manipulate JSON from the front end and send it to the backend like continuously.
Okay. So one thing I would like to say is this: HTMX is not rigid. Underneath HTMX is pure JavaScript. In fact, if you go and look at the file itself that you are linking to, it's just JavaScript. The only thing HTMX is doing is that for some of us that don't want to be writing JavaScript, it's like pre-written JavaScript that you just call upon when you need it. So you call on the part that you need. For example, if you want to make a GET request, you use hxget. Hxget is only calling the section of the JavaScript that does GET request or typical fetch, the regular JavaScript fetch. So the code is already written for you. It's just for you to pick the part that you want and then does that job. Now, if you want to do all these things, variable and stuff like that, in fact, there was an app I built. I had to add additional JavaScript to achieve what I needed to do with HTMX. HTMX was doing it to some point, but then there are some things that, especially the JSON part, that I needed to do. So I just had to put JavaScript directly to do that. Just a few lines of code. But then if I wanted to do everything that I've been doing with HTMX, with JavaScript, man, it's going to be a long thing. But few little things here and there, maybe small animations, small stuff like that you want to do. You don't want to go the HTMX way. Just put your script tag somewhere, write the JavaScript, put it there, and it's going to handle that for you. So HTMX does not stop you from using JavaScript. In fact, it's more like a complementary framework for using JavaScript. But for guys that don't like writing a lot of JavaScript, this is a lifesaver. Okay? Any other question? Okay.
Yeah. So you talked about users signing up on the app, and one advantage that HTML gives that it runs in the background. So I'm coming from a place of cost now. If you are hosting your application on the cloud, let me say for Azure, for instance, for every request you do, there's a kind of cost that happens when you do talk with your backend and stuff. So as the HTML making this request in the background, is it also, in terms of cost, is it also costing you? And why, if it's going to be costing me, why should I now use HTMX when I'll be having that regular background checks and stuff?
So I've actually thought about that, but now let me ask you. Between this, one, a user fills the form, they submit, the page reloads, and then they find out that username is taken, and then they change it to another one. They submit, the page reloads, and then they find out that one is taken, versus right there when they are putting their username, you check and you let them know if the username is available. Which one is better? Yeah. It does not cost more. Either way, you are going to check eventually. If you don't use HTMX, the only thing is that it is manually triggered by the user when they try to submit the form. And it's going to send a request, and then you get the response back, and then you continue that loop until the user finds a username that is available. But instead of doing back and forth, waiting for the user to make that request, you just do it on behalf of the user in the background, and then you check if that username is available, and you let them know straight up. And then there's no back and forth. And then at that point, the user only makes one submission. Click the button once, submit, and then they open an account instead of the back, forth that you usually do. So it's not like it's costing much.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, like, is it still going to cost, like, those calls on the background? So it's still, in essence, what I'm saying, it's still going to cost money. Like,
yeah, of course. And if you don't do it in the background, so it will still cost money. The issue is just that with HTMX, you give your user a better experience instead of them going back and forth with the app. Okay?
Okay. Time
Are
up.
we good?
Thank you very much. Please
All right.
appreciate him.